My mother stood in the center of our living room on New Year's Eve, champagne glass raised high, and said the words that would change everything. Here's to another year of Caleb making us proud. As for Iris, she paused, smiled that tight smile I knew too well. Well, at least she's consistent. The room exploded with laughter. My brother Caleb doubled over, slapping his knee. His wife Bree covered her mouth, trying to hide her grin. Even my father, Gordon, chuckled from his leather recliner, the one no one else was allowed to sit in. And me? I just stood there in the corner by the bookshelf, holding a sparkling cider nobody had bothered to refill, and felt something inside me finally crack wide open. They thought that was the punchline. They had no idea I'd already made a decision that would burn their perfect little world to the ground. I grew up in a brick colonial in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of house that looked magazine-ready from the street. Hydrangeas in the summer, pumpkins in the fall, Christmas lights that blinked in perfect sync every December. Inside, though, everything revolved around one person, Caleb. He was 3 years older, broad-shouldered, loud in that confident way people mistake for leadership. His lacrosse trophies covered an entire wall in the den, dusted weekly by our mother like they were religious artifacts. My debate team medals? Shoved in a shoebox under my bed, next to old notebooks and tangled phone chargers. When Caleb made varsity as a sophomore, Dad threw him a surprise party with a banner that read "Future Champion." When I got accepted into the Governor's School for Advanced Science students, Mom said, "That's wonderful, honey," and immediately asked if I could pick up Caleb's dry cleaning on the way home. Small cuts, 1,000 of them, each one delivered with a smile. Dad wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. He didn't yell or throw things. He just made it clear in every interaction that Caleb was the son and I was furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. When Caleb talked, Dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, nodding like every word was gospel. When I talked, Dad checked his phone or glanced at the TV, already half tuned out before I finished my first sentence. Mom was worse because she pretended to care. She'd squeeze my shoulder and whisper, "You know how your father is, just don't make waves." As if my existence was the waves, as if wanting to be seen was asking too much. The attic became my escape. It smelled like old wood and mothballs, and the single window overlooked the backyard where Caleb practiced his shots for hours while Dad cheered from the patio. Up there, I built circuits, programmed cheap robots I ordered online, taught myself to code by watching YouTube videos on my cracked laptop. Machines didn't care who was the favorite, they just responded when you spoke their language. Aunt Lorelei was the only person who ever spoke mine. She'd show up every few Sundays with pastries from the French bakery downtown, her silver jewelry clinking as she climbed the attic stairs. She'd sit on the floor next to my workbench, asking about whatever project I was buried in, and she'd listen. Actually listen. "You see the world in systems, Iris. That's a gift. Don't let anyone convince you it's not," she said. Quietly, like she knew our house wasn't a place where gifts like mine were celebrated. By the time I turned 22, I'd perfected the art of being small. I graduated with a degree in software engineering from UNC Asheville, summa cum laude, and my parents didn't come to the ceremony. Caleb had a playoff game that same weekend. Dad said, "You understand, right? This is important for his future." I said yes, because that's what I always did. I worked 2 jobs that summer, saving every dollar, sleeping 4 hours a night. By October, I'd scraped together enough for a deposit on a studio apartment in Durham, 2 hours away. It was tiny, just 450 square feet with a kitchen the size of a closet, but it was mine. I didn't tell them I was moving until the day before. Mom cried, not because she'd miss me, but because it looked bad that I was leaving. Dad barely looked up from his tablet. "Durham's expensive," he muttered. "Don't come crying to us when you can't make rent." I didn't. I moved on a rainy Saturday in late October, everything I owned packed into 12 boxes in the back of my used Honda. Aunt Lorelei helped me carry furniture up 3 flights of stairs, and when we finally sat on my bare mattress, exhausted and drenched, she handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver keychain shaped like a compass. "So you always know which direction is yours," she said. I cried for the first time in years. The months between October and New Year's Eve passed in a blur of work and building. I got a job at a tech startup downtown, writing code for an app that helps small businesses manage inventory. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My boss, a woman named Simone with short locks and a laugh that filled the entire office, told me after my first month, "You're the best hire we've made in 2 years." I didn't brush it off. I let it land. I made my apartment into something real. I hung curtains the color of seafoam, bought a small round dining table from a thrift store, and refinished it myself. I sanded it down on a Sunday afternoon, the smell of wood stain filling my tiny space, my hands raw but satisfied. I put up string lights and filled the windowsill with succulents. Every evening after work, I'd sit at that table with my laptop, coding, learning, building a life that didn't require anyone's permission. I made friends, too, real ones. My neighbor Tan, a nursing student who knocked on my door one night because she smelled my burnt attempt at stir-fry and brought over proper ingredients. Simone, who invited me to her book club and didn't take no for an answer. A guy from my gym named Eli who worked in graphic design and made me laugh so hard I snorted coffee out of my nose. They became my people, not by blood, but by choice. In mid-December, I hosted my first dinner party, just the 4 of us, crowded around my tiny table with mismatched plates and wine from the grocery store. Tan brought spring rolls, Eli brought a playlist, Simone brought stories that had us gasping and wiping tears from our eyes. At one point, Tan raised her glass and said, "To Iris for making a space where we all fit." I felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Eli took a photo that night, all of us leaning in, faces glowing under the string lights, the table covered with empty plates and half-full glasses. He posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Found family hits different." Within 2 days, it had over 300 likes. I didn't think much of it until my cousin Shayna texted me, "Saw Eli's post. Your place looks amazing. Why didn't you tell anyone you were doing so well?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "No one asked." 3 days before Christmas, my mother called. Not to check on me, to tell me they expected me home for New Year's Eve. "It's tradition," she said, as if that word carried weight in a house that never treated me like I belonged. I almost said no. I should have said no. But Aunt Lorelei was going to be there, and I hadn't seen her since I moved. So I said yes. I regretted it the moment I pulled into the driveway on December 31st at exactly 6:47 p.m. The house looked the same. Same brick, same perfect landscaping, same decorative wreath on the door with gold ribbon woven through artificial pine branches. But walking inside felt like stepping into a memory I'd been trying to forget. Caleb was already there, of course, sprawled on the couch with Bree tucked under his arm. He glanced up when I walked in, said, "Oh hey," and went back to scrolling on his phone. Mom hugged me, quick and stiff, then immediately asked if I'd brought the cranberry sauce she'd requested. I hadn't. She sighed, loud and theatrical, and said, "Typical." Dad nodded from his recliner. That was it. A nod. Aunt Lorelei was in the kitchen, and the moment I saw her, I felt the tightness in my chest ease just a little. She pulled me into a real hug, the kind that lasted long enough to mean something. "You look different," she said, studying my face. "Good different or bad different?" "Free different." Dinner was tense in the way family dinners always are when everyone's pretending everything is fine. Caleb talked about his new sales job at a pharmaceutical company, how he'd closed a deal worth $340,000 right before Christmas, how his boss said he was leadership material. Mom and Dad hung on every word. nodding, asking follow-up questions, beaming like proud peacocks. When I mentioned my promotion to lead developer, Mom said, "That's nice, sweetie," and immediately turned back to Caleb. "So are you and Bree thinking about buying a house soon?" I set my fork down and stopped trying. After dinner, we moved to the living room for champagne and the countdown. The TV was tuned to the New York ball drop, volume low, just background noise. Mom started pouring champagne into flutes, the fizz rising and popping softly. That's when it happened. Mom stood in the center of the room, glass raised, and delivered her toast, the one about Caleb making them proud and me being consistent. The laughter that followed felt like glass breaking inside my chest. I looked around the room, Caleb, still laughing, wiping tears from his eyes like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Bree, smirking into her glass, her shoulders shaking. Dad, chuckling from his throne, shaking his head like I was the punchline to a joke he'd been telling for years. And then I looked at Aunt Lorelei. She wasn't laughing. Her face was pale, her jaw tight, and her eyes met mine across the room with something that looked like fury and heartbreak mixed together. I set my glass down on the side table. The clink of it against the wood made everyone stop laughing just for a second. "Well," I said, my voice steady and calm, "good thing I moved 2 hours away so you don't have to make space for me anymore." The laughter died. You could hear the ice shifting in someone's drink, cubes knocking against glass, the creak of Dad's recliner as he sat up straighter, Caleb's phone buzzing on the coffee table, a low, persistent hum. Mom's smile faltered. "Iris, it was just a joke." "No," I said, still calm, "it wasn't." I grabbed my coat from the rack by the door and walked out. Behind me, I heard Aunt Lorelei say sharp and loud, "I'm ashamed of all of you." But no one followed me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, breath fogging the windshield. The porch light was still on. The house still looked perfect. Through the front window, I could see them moving around inside, probably already dismissing what just happened, already rewriting the narrative to make me the problem. But I didn't go back inside. I drove to a diner off Highway 40, the kind that stays open all night and smells like coffee and bacon grease. I ordered waffles I didn't eat and scrolled through my phone, numb. That's when I saw it. The photo from my dinner party had been shared again, this time by someone I didn't even know, with the caption, "This is what real family looks like." It had over 2,000 likes. And in the comments, someone had written, "Her smile says everything. She finally found her people." I stared at that comment until the words blurred. Then I opened my messages and texted Thon, Eli, and Simone, "Can I come over?" Thon replied in under a minute, "Doors open, bring yourself." I paid for the waffles I didn't touch, left a 20 on the table, got back in my car, and drove 2 hours through the dark to Durham. The highway was nearly empty, just a few trucks and me, and I drove with the windows cracked despite the cold, because I needed the air, needed to feel like I was moving toward something instead of away. When I got to Thon's apartment at 1:47 a.m., all 3 of them were waiting. No questions, no judgment, just space. Simone handed me tea in a chipped mug with a cat on it. Eli threw a blanket over my shoulders, soft and warm and smelling like lavender detergent. Thon sat next to me on the couch and said, "You don't have to explain, just breathe." So I did, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I'd come home. I woke up on Thon's couch on New Year's Day to the smell of coffee and the sound of rain hitting the windows. My phone was buzzing on the coffee table, screen lighting up over and over like a strobe light. 17 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from Caleb. Not one apology text. I turned the phone face down and walked into the kitchen where Thon was making eggs and Simone was scrolling through her tablet. "Your family?" Simone asked without looking up. "Yeah." "You're gonna answer?" I poured myself coffee, black, the way I'd learned to drink it during those late coding nights. No. Thon slid a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me. Good. That afternoon, Eli showed up with bagels and his laptop. "So," he said, dropping into the armchair, "I need to show you something." He pulled up Instagram and turned the screen toward me. The photo from my December dinner party had gone viral, not just viral in the "your friends liked it" way, viral in the "strangers are sharing it with captions about chosen family and healing" way. It had 47,000 likes. 47,000! How? I whispered. Eli scrolled through the comments, hundreds of them, people sharing their own stories of leaving toxic families, finding real love in friendships, building new tables. Someone had even made it into a quote graphic with my face circled and the words, "She chose peace over proximity." "It's resonating," Simone said quietly from the kitchen. "People see themselves in you." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Aunt Lorelei. I answered. "Iris, have you seen what your mother is doing?" My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "She's on Facebook. She made a post, a long one." I put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Aunt Lorelei read it out loud, her voice tight with anger. "To everyone asking about my daughter, yes, Iris left our New Year's celebration early. Yes, there's been some tension, but what you're not seeing in those viral photos is the full story. Iris has always struggled with feeling included, and we've tried so hard to make her feel special, but she's chosen to paint us as villains for internet sympathy. It breaks my heart. We love her so much, and we just want her to come home. Praying for healing." The room went silent, except for the rain drumming against the windows. "She has 340 likes already," Aunt Lorelei added, her voice breaking. "People are commenting, saying you're ungrateful, that you owe your parents respect." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not sadness, not even anger. Clarity. "She's lying," I said, my voice flat. "I know," Aunt Lorelei said, "and I'm done protecting them. Iris, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." She paused. I could hear her breathing, uneven, like she was gathering courage. "Your parents, they took money from your college fund." The words hit me like cold water. "What?" "When you were 16, your grandparents left you $30,000 in a trust for college. Your parents were supposed to manage it, but they used $22,000 of it to buy Caleb's car. The Audi he drove senior year, that was your money, Iris, your future, and they spent it on him without even telling you." My hands started shaking. The mug of coffee slipped slightly in my grip, hot liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared. Scared of causing a rift. Scared of being cut off from you. But I'm not scared anymore. I'm furious. And I have the bank statements to prove it. I kept copies. All of them." Simone leaned forward, her voice sharp and focused. "Do you still have them?" "Every single one," Aunt Lorelei said. "Transfers, dates, amounts, it's all there." Eli looked at me, eyes sharp with something like determination. "Eli, if you want to stay quiet, we'll support you. But if you want to fight back," he gestured to his laptop, "I can help." I looked at the three of them, these people who owed me nothing and gave me everything. "I'm not staying quiet," I said. That night, I wrote the longest post I'd ever written. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't protect anyone. I told the truth. I talked about the shoebox of medals, the forgotten birthdays, the college graduation they skipped because Caleb had a playoff game. I mentioned the $22,000 they stole from my education fund to buy Caleb a silver Audi A4 with leather seats and a sunroof. I attached screenshots of the bank statements Aunt Lorelei sent me, with account numbers blurred but amounts visible, dates circled in red, transfers highlighted in yellow, and I ended with this. "My mother says I struggle with feeling included. I don't struggle with it. I see it clearly. You can't gaslight someone into believing they were loved when every action proved otherwise. I didn't leave for internet sympathy. I left because I finally loved myself enough to stop begging for crumbs. If that makes me ungrateful, so be it. I'd rather be ungrateful than invisible. I posted it at 11:43 p.m. on January 1st. By midnight, it had 2,000 shares. By morning, it had 89,000. The comment section became a wildfire. People weren't just supporting me, they were angry on my behalf. Someone found my mother's post and flooded it with replies, calling her manipulative, asking why she stole from her own daughter, demanding answers she refused to give. Local news picked it up by January 3rd. A reporter from the Asheville Citizen-Times reached out, asking if I'd be willing to talk about financial abuse in families. I said yes. We met at a coffee shop on January 5th, and I told her everything. She took notes, asked careful questions, and when I showed her the bank statements, her jaw tightened. The article ran on January 6th with the headline, "When Family Ties Become Financial Theft, One Woman's Story." My mother's Facebook post was deleted by January 7th, but the internet doesn't forget. Someone had screenshotted it, and it circulated with the caption, "The missing reasons." People dissected every line, pointed out every manipulation tactic, called her out by name. Her church friends saw it, her book club saw it, the neighbors who'd smiled and waved for years saw it. My father tried to do damage control. He posted on his LinkedIn, of all places, something about family privacy and media sensationalism. His comments were flooded within an hour. His co-workers saw it, his boss saw it. Someone from his office even replied, "Maybe focus less on privacy and more on accountability." Caleb stayed silent. He didn't defend them. He didn't defend me. He just disappeared from social media entirely. His Instagram went private, his Facebook went dark. Bree, however, sent me a private message on Instagram. "You're tearing this family apart for likes. Grow up." I blocked her without responding. On January 10th, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Iris?" The voice was unfamiliar. Male. Hesitant. "Yeah?" "This is Hugh Brennan. I'm a lawyer in Asheville. I've been following your story, and I'd like to help you. Pro bono." I nearly dropped the phone. He explained that what my parents did, using funds from a trust without the beneficiary's knowledge or consent, could be considered financial exploitation. With Aunt Lorelei's bank statements, we had grounds for a civil suit. "I'm not promising millions," he said, "but I can promise they'll be held accountable, legally, publicly, on record." I thought about it for 3 days. On January 13th, I said yes. The lawsuit was filed on January 20th. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the record, about making sure that somewhere in some official document it would say they were wrong, she was wronged. My parents hired a lawyer too, a loud one named Garrett Finch with a silver tongue and expensive suits, who tried to paint me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge. But the bank statements didn't lie. The court date was set for March 15th. In the meantime, my life kept moving forward. My job promoted me to senior developer in February with a $15,000 raise. Simone threw me a surprise party at her apartment, and 20 people showed up. 20 people who actually wanted to celebrate me. They brought wine and cake and cards with messages that made me cry in the best way. Tang and I started a weekly tradition, Sunday night dinners rotating who cooked. Eli designed a logo for my freelance coding side hustle, something sleek and modern with my initials woven into a circuit board design. Aunt Lorelei drove to Durham every other weekend, and we'd spend hours in coffee shops talking about everything and nothing, making up for all the years we'd been kept at arm's length. I even started seeing someone, a guy named River who worked at the bookstore downtown and had the kind of laugh that made strangers smile. He didn't know about the lawsuit at first. When I finally told him over Thai food on our fourth date, he just shrugged and said, "Your past doesn't scare me. Your strength does, but in a good way." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until he said it. The trial was short, just 2 days. My parents' lawyer tried to argue that the money was used for family expenses and that I'd benefited indirectly. Hugh tore that argument apart in under 10 minutes, showing records of the Audi purchase, the exact dates, the titling under Caleb's name, the insurance payments made solely for his vehicle. On the stand, my mother cried. She said she'd made a mistake, that she thought I'd understand, that families help each other. She looked directly at me when she said it, like she was performing for an audience. Hugh asked her one question. "Did you ever tell Iris you were using her money?" She hesitated. "No." "Did you ever intend to pay her back?" Another hesitation. We thought there would be time." "That's a no," Hugh said. My father didn't cry. He sat stiff-backed and silent, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. When Hugh asked him why he thought it was acceptable to take money from his daughter's future, he said Caleb needed reliable transportation. It was an investment in his success. "And Iris didn't deserve the same investment?" Hugh asked. My father didn't answer. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judith Hale with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense, ruled in my favor on March 17th, 2 days after closing arguments. $22,000 plus interest, $27,890 total. But more importantly, she said this, looking directly at my parents. "Parents are entrusted with their children's futures. You violated that trust for favoritism and personal convenience. This court finds your actions to be financially exploitative and morally reprehensible. You will pay the full amount within 90 days, and this judgment will remain on public record." My mother cried. Not the dignified kind of crying, the loud, gasping, "How could this happen to me" kind that echoed through the courtroom. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, face red, veins visible at his temples. Caleb wasn't even there. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, Aunt Lorelei on one side, Hugh on the other. The late afternoon sun hit my face, warm and bright, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread online. Some were reporters with cameras and recorders. Some were just people who'd followed the story and wanted to see how it ended. One woman, probably in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, stopped me on the courthouse steps. "I just want to say thank you," she said, eyes wet. "I let my family steal from me for years because I thought that's what love looked like. You gave me the courage to stop." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. The video of that moment, filmed by someone in the crowd and posted to TikTok, went as viral as the original dinner photo, over 1 million views in 3 days. My parents moved 3 months later, not far, just to a smaller house on the other side of Asheville, a neighborhood where no one knew their names yet, away from the people who'd ask questions, who'd seen the headlines, who'd made up their minds. Caleb and Bree stopped talking to me entirely, which honestly felt like a gift. No more forced small talk, no more pretending we were something we'd never been. I never got an apology. Not from my mother, not from my father, not from my brother, and I stopped waiting for one. On New Year's Eve, exactly 1 year after the toast that changed everything, I hosted another dinner party. This time, my apartment was bigger. I'd moved into a 2-bedroom in a building with a rooftop terrace and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Thang brought champagne, the expensive kind with the gold foil. Eli brought his new boyfriend, a quiet guy named Miles who worked in animation. Simone brought her book club, 5 women who'd become my friends through her. River brought his guitar and played us songs while we cooked. Aunt Lorelei brought a cake with the words, "Here's to year 2, written in perfect script, purple frosting with gold stars. At 11:59 p.m., we stood on the rooftop, glasses raised, the city glowing below us. Someone's Bluetooth speaker played the countdown. 10, 9, 8. To Iris, Aunt Lorelei said, her voice steady and proud, who rebuilt from nothing and made something beautiful. Everyone cheered. 7, 6, 5. To chosen family, Thang added. 4, 3, 2. To new beginnings, River said, squeezing my hand. 1. And as the fireworks burst over Durham, bright and loud and impossible to ignore, I felt something I'd never felt at my parents' house. I felt like I mattered, because I did. Not because someone finally decided I was worth their time, but because I decided I was worth my own. If you've ever had to choose yourself over the people who were supposed to choose you, drop a comment. I see you. And if this story hit home, subscribe, because there's more truth coming and you won't want to miss it.